Hello and welcome to Clipper Scale Models. Today I'd like to go over a Shelf of Doom rescue project that I'm working on, in this video. This is an F-80 shooting star from Monogram, 1/48 scale. It's a kit that I purchased when I got back into model building. I think I spent $3 on it. It had no instructions, it didn't even have a box. I built it, and then I had problems with the paint job, specifically the masks. I created vinyl masks for the national insignia, but unfortunately used the wrong kind of vinyl material. So when I tried to remove it, I couldn't get it off, so I ended up having to scrape it off. And that basically made the model just completely go away as far as my interest was concerned. So it sat there for a number of years, and then I finally decided to try again. I tried with mission model paints, and I wasn't happy with the way the colors of the metallics looked. So, and you can see it in this photo here. Anyway, so that brings us up to the present, and then so this is the kit here that I'm actually using for this project. And here we go. I'm starting to get into my recovery. Now, it's rather than strip the paint for a third time, I decided to just smooth sand the existing paint so that I could, save myself a little bit of time. I pretty much resigned myself to just getting this kit done because I'd had so many problems with not only the paint but also seams breaking and that kind of thing. Anyway, so I'm just smooth sanding it here with some 3000 grit sanding sponge. Yeah, with metallic finishes, it's really important to get a smooth finish, and I might have been able to get away with just painting over the Mission Models primer, but there was enough of a mess there that I just decided to sand the whole thing and basically eliminate any possibility of imperfect finishes. So sanding this thing took a little while. I mean, you can see in the video I had to go over the red areas, I had to go over the side of the fuselage. It just took a while. But in the end, once I had it smooth sanded and wiped down, then I was able to go ahead and get ready for painting. Now, one of the first things I was going to do was paint the canopy, mainly just because I wanted to do that color first. And I had to mask that canopy on the inside and the outside. The inside because there's some wires built into the canopy that had to be masked, and that's what you see me painting here, is the wires for the canopy. And then afterwards, I had to get into painting the regular interior colors. So what you're seeing here is the interior color, interior green being painted on the canopy. Once that was done, then I could go back to moving on to the rest of the paint job. Here I'm doing the actual metallic finishes, and I'm using the AK Interactive Metallics Extreme, I think they're called Extreme Metallic. Anyway, started with just a base coat of aluminum and then going over all the surfaces, making sure that I had a good finish. Now with this paint, my experience with it in the past was that if you don't put a clear coat over it, you can't really mask over it, and I needed to do masking. So after all this was applied, I had to go back and apply clear coat. I used Tamiya X22 gloss for that. I found it to be the best surface for masking, at least for me. As you can see, there was quite a bit of painting to do as well. I mean, it just takes, it takes your time. You need to get in and cover everything with several light coats. And I elected to paint the red areas rather than try to mask them off and just paint them red. Um, Normally what I would do is paint these colors beforehand. In this particular case, I decided just to paint the aluminum beforehand. Now I'm painting the tail surfaces, the red areas. This particular paint scheme is very colorful and is one that I wanted to finish and get on my display shelf because it's just a nice looking paint scheme. It's got red tails, red wings, and it's got a blue nose. And just the combination of those colors and the metallic finish just makes for a nice standout model. So this is what drove me to come back to this kit several times, even though it's been 6 years since I originally started it. After the clear coat was put on, I went ahead and masked it and painted some different color aluminum panels. I used a matte aluminum and a duraluminum. I think I'm using duraluminum here. This gives a nice effect to the metallic finish. Makes it look more realistic instead of just being one continuous color. As I mentioned before, I wanted to paint the national insignia with masks, vinyl masks that I made on a vinyl cutting machine. And here you see me getting ready to transfer those masks using transfer tape. Now, this particular national insignia is surrounded by silver, the aluminum, even though it's going to be in the red areas. So this extra um, mask here is just that it's just a mask for that aluminum area. And what you do is you put that down, you paint the colors, then you come back and you eventually put the mask inside of it. Here I'm pulling the transfer tape off. As long as you're careful and pull it slowly away from across the vinyl mask, it will come off without peeling the mask itself off. And here you can see that center section that's going to be removed prior to the next colors. Now the next colors on this kit were going to be the white and then red. Once those are down, then we would do some more masking. Here you can kind of see what the plan is. There's going to be a red stripe there in front of the tail. In order to mask for that, what I did was I took this 1mm Tamiya tape and placed it where I want the stripe to be. And then using some other wider Tamiya masking tapes, I masked on both sides of it. um, to basically using that tape, that 1 millimeter tape, as a guide to place the correct masking. So you basically just wrap this around, get it nice and straight as much as you can. It can be a little bit tricky. Sometimes you have to shift things around just a little bit to keep them so they look like they're straight. You can use measurements. I've always found that to be a little bit more trouble than it's worth. So I usually just try to do it by eye as best I can. Okay, now we have the centerpiece there. We can put the side masking, and this is which will actually protect the area from the paint. Now the red paint on this particular plane starts on the left hand side of the fuselage national insignia, not quite at the end. It starts partially over the bar. So the masking here isn't a problem where it covers the national insignia, because that part's not going to be painted anyway. Now we apply the masking to the other side of the thin strip, and once that's completed, we pull the thin strip out and we have a evenly spaced fuselage stripe. It's important to get the masking tape down so you don't get any bleeder. So I always go over these with a toothpick to burnish the edges down. Now here I'm removing that center piece of masking tape, and you can see how when that's painted you'll get a nice thin fuselage stripe, and this will be painted red along with the tail. There's also a serial number on the tail that's in bare aluminum, so this area needs to be masked off so that it doesn't get red paint. Okay, now here we're going into the white paint. First, I want to have white underneath the red, and you can see now that I'm painting the center of the insignia white, because those are going to have stars in there at some point, and the masks that will go inside there will be taken apart at the in the appropriate order in order to leave the white masks, the white areas covered as you paint the other colors, including the red. White's always a tricky color. I find that you need to go over thin coats, but not too thin. Otherwise you end up having to put on too much. I typically mix my paints about 70-30, 70% thinner. I think with the white I went down to around 50, maybe 60%. Probably closer to 50, just to be sure that I can get a nice coat. And then here I start off by misting out a coat first, and then you go back over and you put on a second heavier coat. Okay, now after the mist coat of white, I'm going back over with the heavier white coat. You can see it covers pretty good. Um, as long as you're careful, you don't want to apply too much and get a run. You just want to get a nice smooth coat. And I find, to me, it paints to be excellent for this kind of work. They cover well, they dry nice and hard, and they're easy to paint. Okay, so now the white's done. Um, I'm adding the national insignia masks back in, and these are going to be taken, part of them are going to be taken off. Well, let's see, at this point I'm just taking off the center bar. That's the red portion of the national insignia. The rest of it's burnished down, and we do the same thing on the fuselage markings as well as the lower wing. And here we're painting the red. I'm using Gunze red matter for this color. It's pretty close to, from what I can tell, it's pretty close to the color that was used on these aircraft. And you can see it's very vivid red. It's important to make sure you get the leading edges. Again, you want to mist this color on. Oh, you can also see here how the red only covers a portion of the national insignia on the fuselage because the rest of it's masked off. And although it's not shown here, the center section, the stripe that I masked off earlier, that gets painted as well. You can see this red is really makes it stand out. And now here you see the model with the masks removed. Notice that the white star and the white bars are still masked. Now we're going to be painting blue, so the white area of the insignia that will be blue is unmasked. And I'm also using, I printed out the curve on the nose to use as a template, and I'm using Tamiya tape for curves here to define the outline of that nose. So this is something I did similar to what I did when I did the stripe on the back, where I use a smaller piece of tape to define the area, and then I mask off using heavier pieces of tape afterwards. This white Tamiya tape for curves is really good because it just bends really nice. It's perfect for doing this kind of work on a fuselage when you have to go around a lot of little curves. It does take a little bit of effort. You need to, treat it like masking tape. Okay, now we're removing the template, which is just, like I said, just a printed piece of paper, and using regular masking tape, masking off all the areas that are going to be blue. Now I'm using the insignia blue mix that I had for the national insignias. The nose, I believe, was painted with to me, royal blue, but I can't quite remember. The beauty of using masks and painting like this is that you don't have to deal with setting solutions and worrying about your decals conforming to the details in the model. Now this particular model doesn't have a lot of surface detail because I never did any riveting. I just basically added panel lines. But nonetheless, it's good practice for me to paint the markings. I've only done this a few times. And as I mentioned on previous attempts at this, I painted the markings first and did the regular colors afterwards. I think that actually works better most of the time because you can avoid any outlines showing around the mask if you were to paint it, incorrectly. Okay, so I use the same approach for masking the drop tanks or the wingtip wingtip tanks. I used a temp from the instructions, taped on there, used to me a masking or tape for curves, and then stuff everything. And this is getting the same blue as the nose of the aircraft. The last time I did this, on my first attempt at painting this, I tried to do it by eye, and they weren't anywhere near as good. Using the paper masks, which were scaled up to fit, just made all the difference in the world. Okay, now you can see the national insignia is finished, and I'm adding an anti-glare panel, which is an olive green. I believe it's Tamiya olive green, but I can't remember at the moment. Having the markings on this really starts to bring out the paint scheme. You can see around the national insignia is the aluminum showing through, and that's where that extra mask helped. Okay, now I'm doing the aircraft numbers. These are being done in black, as well as the radome. The radome was actually done flat black, and I believe I did the numbers in a semi-gloss black. And these were also created using the vinyl masks. I found the appropriate font for these numbers, and then I just I had to modify them a little bit because they were a little bit wrong, but I was able to modify them sufficiently to get the appearance I was after. I used it for the serial numbers. Now these serial numbers on the tail are probably about as small as you can get away with painting with a mask. And there we go. You can see now the effect of the various colors. Okay, then there's still more painting. We have the wing walks, which are also black. I used a flat black for this. Once these were done, I had also masked off the landing gear wells, and these were painted with interior green. I would do a little bit of detail painting in these areas later, and also do some oil washes to bring, and panel washes to bring out some of the detail. Once these were done, there was a decal that needed to be applied to each side. It's the squadron's hat in the ring decal. These are the only decals that I actually used. They weren't from the kit. They're from an old micro scale decal set. It was the only one I actually needed. Thankfully, because I tested some of those decals and they were so old that they cracked. I was able to get away without cracking these particular decals, which is pretty amazing given how fragile they are. Once the decals had dried, I gave it a clear coat over the decal area. Then I started using a pen wash, dark gray for the aluminum. I use this for most of the colors for this particular plane. Basically, I try to keep this confined as much as possible to the panel lines without trying to smear it all over the finish. Now you can do it for certain model effects. It works well, but for this particular one, I wanted to keep this model as relatively clean. So it's a little bit tedious doing this, and you're going to get a little bit of overlap. But what you do is, as you apply it, it uses capillary action to go into the seam lines, and then you can go back over it afterwards and clean it up. And what I do to clean it up with this particular, these Tamiya panel line washes, is I'll use mineral spirits on a brush, lightly dampened on a brush, to wipe away excess. And you'll see that in a moment when I get to the cleanup portion of this video. You can see that the lanyard wells here have been all weathered now. Okay, so now we're cleaning up the pin washes. I've tried using the cotton swab, but I found I couldn't get enough finesse control. So I went to the using a brush shortly after this to do the remainder. The trick to wiping away any washes like this is to keep the whatever utensil you use, hot butter or brush, to keep it damp, not soaking wet. Here you go. Here's the final reveal. Hope you enjoyed this. It was fun sharing this with you, and I hope to see you guys again in a future video. You all take care now, and I'll leave this last pictures just to let you look at it.